Well, thanks for being here this afternoon. I'm joined by the chairman of the New York State Republican Committee, Nick Langworthy, along with Sheriff Kirk Imperati, Majority Leader Will Truitt, and legislators Steve Caswell and Ben Geller. We want to continue a dialogue that Dutchess County has been having really for a number of years, but has been made more critical over the course of the last 2 years. I want to start with a bit of a story. When I began as county executive working directly with then Undersheriff Kirk Imperati, Dutchess County began a comprehensive effort to address public safety, inmate population, and investment in the criminal justice system. In the first 8 years that we worked together, Dutchess County, with leadership from the legislature, was able to reduce violent crime by 50%. Along with a 40% reduction in inmate population. We did that by investing in law enforcement and community policing, mental health and substance use programming, and the most comprehensive alternatives to incarceration in the entire country. By focusing on these things, we put first and foremost our responsibility to provide for public safety. We gave tools and resources and support to law enforcement. At the same time, we provided the support and investment in victims and witnesses. We warned the state legislature and the governor at the time that if New York were to move forward with cashless bail as they had conceived it, we would create a dangerous situation for New Yorkers. That is true. The state legislature and then Governor Cuomo and now Governor Hochul, along with Democrats in every level of government, embraced New York's cashless bail. And by doing so, they have undermined our ability to provide for public safety and have risked the very lives of our neighbors. My own opponent, Antonio Delgado, in 2020, embraced cashless bail. Yesterday, he stood with a couple local sheriffs, and we admire those local sheriffs, to advocate for new dollars to law enforcement. He neglected to tell them that he had already voted to reduce funding to law enforcement all across America and continues to embrace cashless bail, which by no definition is a success. New York, in fact, is the only state in America that eliminated the ability for judges to consider risk and dangerousness and to have any degree of discretion. And because of it, police officers are losing their lives, friends and neighbors' safety is at risk, and we have a crime crisis all across the state of New York. In the next 7 days, the New York State Legislature will consider adopting a state budget. We called on Governor Hochul only months ago to include in her budget a plan to rescind and to reform cashless bail in the state of New York. She ignored us. We hope that the state legislature will speak up on behalf of our constituents, although have very little faith they will do so. And so let's just talk a moment about what cashless bail has meant here in Dutchess County. We talked about this a few weeks ago with the sheriff and local law enforcement. We know that there are individuals who would ordinarily be in an alternative to incarceration or some program or service that would keep them from committing crimes. In fact, several thousand individuals over the course of the last 2 years are likely in the community who ordinarily in Dutchess County would have been either in an alternative to incarceration or in a jail setting because they pose a risk to others. Because of cashless bail, prosecutors have a more difficult time bringing cases forward. Add to that discovery reform, and every obstacle has been put in the way of law enforcement and prosecutors to provide for our protection. Thousands upon thousands of crimes are committed in this community today over the last 2 years because cashless bail has allowed the criminal to continue to commit crimes, creating new victims and jeopardizing public safety. And so we believe that the state of New York needs to rescind cashless bail and begin the thoughtful approach that Dutchess County and communities like ours across the country had engaged in to provide for public safety. And I call on Congressman Delgado to finally publicly say that he opposes cashless bail. He has not and he will not. And for that, our community is less safe. And so I join all my colleagues in the state legislature, those Republicans across the state, county leaders, local law enforcement, advocates, and calling on those who claim to be leaders to take a leadership role and move forward with rescinding cashless bail. Today in New York, if you are an individual who abuses a spouse or another individual in a relationship, it is possible in the state of New York as an abuser to be back in the home where the crime was committed before the victim has gone through a screening with law enforcement and prosecutors. There are cases of abusers who return to the scene of the crime while the victim is forced to live in a shelter. There is a way to confront inequities in our criminal justice system. There cannot be two forms of justice, one for the rich and one for the poor. But there must be one form of justice that seeks justice to protect victims and our community and to hold criminals accountable. New York needs to act now. And I call on Congressman Delgado and others to abandon what is a reckless and dangerous policy that is threatening public safety and the lives of our neighbors. And with that, I welcome Chairman Nick Langworthy.
Thank you so much, Mr. County Executive. It's great to be back here in Dutchess County with Marcus as he lays out just the cold hard facts here on what has happened with our criminal justice system, to be joined by distinguished members of the legislature, and also to be here. And I'd like to offer my strong support for Sheriff Kirk Imperati as you face election this year. I mean, my dear late friend Sheriff Butch Anderson thought the world of Kirk, and met Kirk many years ago with Sheriff Anderson, and I know he's doing a great job for the people of this community, keeping us safe. But we have been talking about this issue that Marcus expanded on all over the state, and we're going to continue every single day until it's fixed to continue that conversation. And because something has to be done, and not lipstick on a pig like Kathy Hochul is proposing in the budget, a 10-point plan of buzzwords and clicks to change people's minds and let them think that she's actually getting something accomplished. They have to repeal cashless bail, period, end of story. Restore criminal justice in the state of New York. And first we need to be clear about what is happening here. For many years, the radical left has been systematically working to infiltrate and dismantle the criminal justice system. The candidates and the elected officials, from legislators who write the laws to the DAs who are charged with enforcing them, they're responsible for this crime crisis. Those that wanted this new policy that came online several years ago. The thing that everyone needs to know, that there's no longer a distinction between the radical left and the current Democratic Party. They're one and the same. They're not different. They're putting in their policies, in their laws, they're completely out of the mainstream, and they're putting people in danger. We've seen the data. We see the papers every single day in the state. And Antonio Delgado, your congressman, he wants to have it both ways. He wants to stand with sheriffs and talk about the need to increase funding for law enforcement, yet the way he votes and acts in his actual duties makes every New Yorker and every American less safe. But you don't get to have it both ways when people's lives are at stake. There's going to be people like us that are going to point out what your record actually is in Washington, D.C. And when every day we're learning that another innocent person has become a victim of a crime, he is talking out of both sides of his mouth. He's saying one thing to the press while he gives a wink and a nod to AOC in the radical left wing of the Democratic Party and the networks in Washington, D.C. that fund these clandestine efforts to infiltrate and to cut away at our criminal justice system. They're funding his campaign. You can look at the records, the publicly available records that show the $5+ million that sits in that treasury. He gets them from pretty nefarious sources. Antonio Delgado ran on a message of criminal justice reform, and he supports the horrific bail law. And he's now saying that all of a sudden we need to support the police, but he isn't the only one. You look at the whole system in Washington, from Biden to Pelosi to Delgado. The 180 that Democrats are trying to have could give you whiplash. I mean, it's like they think we have no memory that goes beyond the day before. They spent the entire last election cycle talking about defunding the police, and now they're realizing that they have a major political problem on their hands, that elections have consequences and policies have consequences. And now they're singing a different tune. Their ideology hasn't changed one iota. They just want your votes, so they're trying to cling to power and change their tune. But here are the facts. Antonio Delgado supports the bail law as it exists today. Antonio Delgado has taken money from the defund the police champion AOC and has voted with AOC 92% of the time in Washington. That's not a voting record that reflects the values of this community. Antonio Delgado has taken money from Indivisible, a far-left extreme group that works to elect people who support defunding the police. Antonio Delgado wants to empty prisons, and he wants to end mandatory sentencing. Antonio Delgado wants to handcuff law enforcement, voting to open them and their families up to civil lawsuits, which would have a chilling effect on policing. Antonio Delgado has been utterly silent when violent crime has risen in the 19th Congressional District. And I don't care what he tries to tell you here in an election year, that is Antonio Delgado's record. No one can speak better to this than Marc Molinaro, Sheriff Imperati, and the people that are on the front lines of keeping the county of Dutchess safe. They've seen the increase in violent crime and an increase in reoffenders. This isn't just a problem for inner cities. It's permeated every single community because criminals are emboldened and know that they can walk right out the door after an arrest. And with all the changes to discovery laws, cases have been totally stacked against the victim and for the criminal. We're handcuffing our law enforcement officers, but not the criminals. There are real-life consequences to these policies. Overdose deaths of our young people at the hands of heroin dealers, serial drunk drivers, burglaries, assaults. There's no such thing as a victimless crime. And Antonio Delgado and the Democratic Party have chosen criminals over crime victims every single time. Is that who you want representing you in the halls of the Capitol building? Or do you want someone who has a record of policies that have made the people of Dutchess County more safe? Marc's policies got violent, dangerous criminals off the streets and intervention services to those who needed it. He's got a track record, and you can look it up. Before one-party Democrat rule in New York and Washington and Dutchess County, they were all very safe places to live. This is a wonderful place to live, work, and raise a family, and we need to keep it that way. Our communities are being destroyed, and the people in charge, from the governor to the state legislators that have a say on what the future of the bail reform law is in this budget process, they must be held accountable from today until election day. And I, as chairman of this party, and Republicans across the state will make sure that that happens. But also Antonio Delgado and our federal representatives that have talked out of both sides of their mouth at the Capitol. You know, it's one thing to, they follow the crowd in Washington, but then when they come home, all of a sudden, they're one of the good guys. The media has got to make sure that that doesn't stand, that they get asked the tough questions when they're here at home. A vote for Antonio Delgado is simply a vote for Nancy Pelosi. It's a vote for AOC and the radical squad members that have brought this extreme leftist agenda to the forefront in the United States House of Representatives. A vote for Delgado is also a vote for criminals over crime victims. A vote for Delgado is a vote for a dangerous status quo over sanity, safety, and security. So do not let him trick you when he's here at home. Ask the tough questions of Antonio Delgado, but more importantly, elect someone with a proven track record of improving their community and keeping Dutchess County and the Hudson Valley a better and safer place. Vote Marc Molinaro this fall for Congress. I thank you very much, and I'll turn it back over to Marcus.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Go ahead. Will Truitt, Majority Leader.
It's an honor to be here, but honestly, it's sad that we have to be here today to talk about cashless bail and what it has done to our society. The fact of the matter is this: since cashless bail became a reality here in New York State, our communities have become less safe. It seems like every morning you turn on the news and you see down in New York City, another innocent person was pushed in front of a subway, pushed in front of a train, and it usually is by a career criminal who is out on the streets because of this very policy. Just a few weeks ago, we saw it here in Poughkeepsie. We saw a career criminal who has been arrested 9 times since July of 2021 for different crimes, drag a police officer after a carjacking down the road 2 blocks and seriously injure one of our town of Poughkeepsie police officers and put them in the hospital. And it's because of cashless bail. We're taking care of criminals and we're not protecting our community, and it is flat out wrong. And it is because of Congressman Antonio Delgado, Governor Kathy Hochul, and the Democrats, the radicals up in Albany, who are pushing this initiative and this agenda, and it needs to stop. And that's why I'm supporting Marc Molinaro for Congress this year. He will be a leader, and he will be someone who stands up for actual public safety and protects our communities. Thank you all.
Any questions? Thank you, everybody, for being here. We're going to continue to put pressure on not only the congressman, but our state legislative representatives in a call to end what is a reckless and dangerous policy here in the state of New York.
Thank you.